Hello everyone. A number of you may have a number of questions that have come out of some of the announcements today. So what I'm going to try and do is answer the questions that I would have liked to have asked if it was me sitting in your shoes. The first one is, what are we doing? Well, the short version is we've announced a demerger from the Cardno business of the materials testing, quality and measurement business. Basically everything that operates under the portfolio company division within the Cardno structure. Why are we doing it? There are a number of different reasons why we think this makes sense. We think that the two businesses are culturally very different, and we think that the best way for each business to be able to take advantage of the potential that's in front of it is to look to separate them into two distinct operating entities that have two distinct groups of shareholders and trade as two distinct businesses. We also think that with the opportunities in front of each business, that's the best way of creating value for shareholders. We also think that they each have different risks attached to each business, and putting them in the one company sometimes shares that risk in an unfair way to the other part of the business. One of the other things that we worry about is that as we have a restriction on capital within one company, as one business grows, the other one potentially loses strength. And fundamentally, we think at the end of the day, if the two businesses operated separately, it's going to create a better outcome for shareholders, staff, customers, and all stakeholders involved. So when did we start thinking about this process? Look, there wasn't a particular day that this came to mind. It's something that's just evolved over time. We recognised a number of years ago that the materials testing, quality and measurement businesses operated quite distinctly from the rest of the business. Fundamentally, Cardno is a professional services, engineering services and consulting business. The other part of the business, which trades under portfolio companies, operates really very differently, whether it's culturally, whether it's the way in which it's managed, whether it's the way that staff deal with each other and their customers. In every way, it operates quite distinctly. And what we found was that we were trying to straitjacket that business within the Cardno way when it really needed to operate independently. We found that the best way of doing that was to separate it out so that it operated in a different style of management, it had more accountability for its own operations, and it had more ability to make decisions outside of the Cardno structure. And that proved to be very, very successful. And as that business continued to evolve and succeed, we ended up looking at making small acquisitions to support that business, starting with the full acquisition of the T2 business in Canada, which has proved to be a very successful opportunity for the business, followed by the Sure Search acquisition in Australia, which also allowed us to do more and to complement our existing business in underground surveying, followed by a couple of other measurement businesses that were tucked into the business here in Australia. And more recently, last year, the acquisition of the Rabe-Kistner business, which is sort of a copy of our existing construction sciences businesses in Australia, which has a very, very strong market share position within the Texas market in the United States. With that acquisition of the Rabe business in the US, we sat back and suddenly realised that we'd built a business of considerable scale within the portfolio company structure, and that that business was now big enough that it could potentially operate as a separate entity in its own right. And the more we thought about that, the more we realised that that was the best thing to do for shareholders and staff, to give that business its own life, to operate in its own way, with its own staff, own board, own customers and own shareholders. So what happens next? Well, there's a vote. That vote's likely to happen in October, and we hope that you will all support that vote because we do genuinely think that that's the best thing for this business. What will then happen is that every shareholder of the company will get, instead of one share in Cardno, will keep their one share in Cardno, but get a new share in Integer. And that's it. So there's no transfer of value. You will just get two different shares, and you'll get to follow two companies instead of one, and you'll get to see how each business prospers in turn. So what does this mean for Cardno? What's left behind and not being demerged? Look, we're really excited about that. I think you'll have a company which has a single-minded focus. It'll be purely a professional services, engineering services business. It will have a very homogenous culture in terms of the way in which it engages in what it does for its customers and the way in which it works with its staff. And it'll have a much cleaner approach to where it's going from a strategic perspective in understanding what the future holds for Cardno. And the challenges that the company will face are different to the Integer business. So what does this mean for Integer? Pretty much the same thing. It'll continue to grow domestically in Australia, and it'll continue to look at growing out its footprint in the US market, both organically and by acquisition. Both businesses, our underground surveying business in the US, as well as our materials testing business in the US, have great opportunities in front of them. And we're very excited about being able to follow that through under the Integer mandate. Similarly, I would say for Cardno, there are some extremely exciting opportunities that we see in front of it. We haven't been short of looking at opportunities and taking advantage of them when they make sense for us from a strategic fit perspective. More recently, that saw the acquisition of a complementary business for our existing engineering services business in Victoria. And more recently, again, we've been looking, Susan and the team in the States has been looking at opportunities in the US market where we can expand. I think this process of separation will only accelerate that opportunity, where each business will be able to follow down its opportunities in its own strategic path and look to execute on those without having to worry about the other or where capital's being spent. So why do I think it's a good idea and why am I excited about it? Hopefully from some of the answers I've already given you, you can sense that I'm excited about the opportunity in front of it. I think it all boils down to the fact, it's very simple really. We have two great businesses with two distinct sets of opportunities, which are material in nature, with one competing amount of capital. And if we separate the two businesses out into those two independent businesses, they'll be able to access capital more freely, not only from ourselves as Crescent as a major supporting shareholder, but from the markets within which they operate. And they'll be able to assess more freely the risk and the return that each of those opportunity sets presents to each of the respective businesses. And I think that is a real win-win situation for you as a shareholder, you as an employee, and for every stakeholder involved with each of those respective businesses. Who's going to run these businesses? Well, for the Cardno business today, nothing's going to change. That will still be Ian. Ian's done a great job in the last 12 months, and I don't think anyone can dispute the amount of energy and effort that he's put into the business, nor the strategic vision that he's shown for the business as a whole. I think the future for the Cardno business is really exciting. In regards to the Integer business, I'm really excited to see that Matt Courtney is going to be the chief executive of that business. Matt's a fantastic employee. He's been a major member of the senior management team in the company for a very long period of time. And I have no other way of describing this, but every part of the Integer business almost oozes out of Matt's pores. He loves that business deeply and he breathes it and lives it every single day. I think his knowledge of the business is second to none, and I think he'll be a great leader for that business into the future. So what can go wrong? I think with every business, there are risks that come about from that respective business. I think, though, in this situation, we mitigate and lower the risk that we had as one business by separating it into two. Each business will have to become much more attuned to the risks that each part of its business faces and not rely on the other to get it out of trouble. It means that each part of the business will be much more focused on generating a suitable return from both a risk management perspective as well as a capital appreciation perspective and a capital management perspective in regards to what it does. And I think that's really healthy. I think that risk sometimes gets hidden within a bigger business. And by separating it out, everybody becomes much more attuned to managing that risk and opportunity set in front of each business. So I actually think it's probably going to be a better opportunity for each business. So what are Crescent's intentions in all of this? I don't think there's any change in the way in which we behave today. We've been a long-term supporter of the Cardno business and we remain as one. I would probably best categorise the stage at which our investment is in as the end of the beginning rather than the beginning of the end. We think that we're really at the end of the beginning of the journey, where we finished restructuring the business, we finally got Cardno into a homogenous, culturally aligned business, and by the end of this transaction and the demerger, we'll have a very, very clean business within Cardno. We're really excited about the opportunity set in front of Cardno over the next 5 years that presents itself from the level of infrastructure spend and the level of general engineering services work that's going to be conducted in both the US and the Australian markets over the next decade. There's no doubt that whatever you read or whatever you hear, that there's a focus, a new renewed focus on level of infrastructure development and that it's going to increase, whether it's in water, whether it's in transport, whatever it is. And luckily we have a number of practice areas that actually will benefit from that. As far as the Integer business is concerned, we're just as excited by that. We see great opportunities for the Integer business going forward, and our intention is to support that fully. In the first instance, that will see Neville Book as the chairman of that business and really drive with Matt the performance of that business over time. I think that's it at this stage. Hopefully I've answered some of your questions. Thank you very much.